The auctioneer's gavel cracked like thunder against mahogany. Cordelia Brightwater barely heard it over the hammering of her own heart. She clutched the deed to her grandmother's farm in trembling fingers, watching strangers bid on everything she'd ever loved. The rocking chair where Grandmother Iris had taught her to embroider, the cast-iron stove that had warmed countless winter mornings, the collection of blue glass bottles that caught sunlight like captured dreams, sold to the gentleman in the back for $47. Cordelia's chest constricted as another piece of her history disappeared into foreign hands. The crowd pressed closer, their eager faces blurring through her tears. She needed air. She needed escape. Stumbling through the back door of the auction hall, she collided with something solid and warm. Strong hands steadied her shoulders, and she looked up into the most striking amber eyes she'd ever seen. "Easy there, miss," the stranger said, his voice carrying the soft drawl of mountain folk. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Cordelia stepped back, suddenly aware of his weathered hands still resting on her arms. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes that had seen better days. A drifter, by all appearances, yet something in his gentle manner made her feel safer than she had all morning. "I'm fine," she lied, wiping her cheeks. With the back of her hand, just getting some air. He released her, but didn't move away. "That your family's belongings in there?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Was everything's being sold to pay debts? Her voice cracked on the last word. The stranger's expression softened. "Name's Maverick Holloway. I've been sleeping rough behind the hall here for a few nights, waiting for work. Heard tell this was Iris Brightwater's place being auctioned off." "You knew my grandmother?" Cordelia's surprise momentarily pushed aside her grief. Knew of her, had quite the reputation. For kindness around these parts, used to leave food for folks down on their luck. Touched the brim of his worn felt hat. "I'm sorry for your loss, miss." Cordelia Brightwater. She studied his face, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of hard living. "And honest work, you said you're looking for employment?" Maverick nodded. "Been traveling from town to town, taking whatever work I can find. Good with my hands, decent with horses, better with fixing things than breaking them." An idea began forming in Cordelia's mind, desperate, perhaps foolish. But the only thing that made sense in a world suddenly turned upside down. "I still own the farmhouse and 40 acres. Lost the livestock and equipment to creditors, but the land is mine free and clear. It needs work, though. Roof's got holes, fences are down, and the well pump's been acting up. You offering me work? I'm offering you a proposition." Cordelia straightened her shoulders, channeling her grandmother's steel spine. "Room and board in exchange for repairs and improvements. I can't pay wages, but I can cook, and there's a roof over your head, such as it is." Maverick studied her face for a long moment, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks under his scrutiny. Finally, he smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen. "All week. When do I start?" Before she could answer, a commotion erupted from inside the hall. Through the open door, they heard the auctioneer's voice rise above the crowd. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a most unusual item. A leather satchel, apparently left behind by someone in the hall, contains what appears to be ... my word." Cordelia grabbed Maverick's arm. "We should see what that's about." But as they pushed through the crowd toward the auction block, neither noticed the way people stepped aside for Maverick, or the nervous glances cast in his direction. And neither saw the wanted poster that had been nailed to the oak tree outside the hall that very morning, bearing a familiar face and the words, "Reward, dead or alive." The auctioneer held up a leather satchel that looked like it had traveled 1,000 miles, his face flushed with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this bag contains what appears to be a considerable sum of money, along with some rather interesting documents." Cordelia felt Maverick tense beside her. His hand moved instinctively to his hip, where she now noticed the subtle bulge of a concealed weapon. Her breath caught in her throat. "That's mine," Maverick said quietly, but his voice carried clearly through the suddenly hushed crowd. All eyes turned toward them. The auctioneer peered over his spectacles. "Sir, if you could provide some identification of the contents... There's $347 in mixed bills, A letter from my sister in Colorado and a deed to a silver claim outside Deadwood. Maverick's voice remained steady, but Cordelia noticed the slight tremor in his hands. The deeds. Got a water stain on the bottom right corner from when I crossed the creek at Devil's Fork. The auctioneer opened the satchel and examined its contents. His eyebrows shot up as he verified the details. That's remarkably accurate, sir. However, given the amount of money involved, I'm afraid I'll need to hold on to this until Sheriff Morrison can. No need for that, Harold. A gravelly voice cut through the crowd. Sheriff Morrison himself pushed through the throng, his weathered face grim beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Behind him followed his deputy, a nervous young man whose hand rested on his gun butt, Cordelia's. Heart hammered against her ribs. She glanced at Maverick, but his face had gone carefully blank, revealing nothing. Sheriff Morrison, the auctioneer said with obvious relief, "This gentleman claims ownership of the satchel, and his description matches the contents. But given the sum involved, I'll handle this, Harold." The sheriff's steel-gray eyes fixed on Maverick. Interesting timing, a stranger. We had some excitement. Over in Millbrook 3 days ago, bank robbery. Witnesses described a man matching your general appearance. The crowd murmured and began backing away, creating a widening circle around Maverick and Cordelia. She felt suddenly exposed, standing so close to a man who might be a wanted criminal. Sheriff Maverick said calmly, "I've never set foot in Millbrook. It's been traveling south from Wyoming for the past 2 weeks looking for honest work. Can anyone vouch for your whereabouts 3 days ago?" Maverick was quiet for a moment. "I was camped alone in the hills north of here. Can't prove it except by my word." The deputy's hand tightened on his weapon. "Sheriff, maybe we should hold your horses, Billy." Sheriff Morrison stepped closer to Maverick, studying his face intently. "You got that satchel legally, son?" "Every penny. Sold my horse and gear in Cheyenne, plus some gold I panned last summer." Maverick met the sheriff's gaze without flinching. "The deed's legitimate, too. Bought it off a prospector who was heading back east to his family," Cordelia found, herself holding her breath. Round them, the crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. She could see the wanted poster now, crumpled in the deputy's back pocket, but couldn't make out the details. Sheriff Morrison reached for the satchel and examined the contents thoroughly. He held up the deed, squinting at the water stain, then looked at the letter. After what felt like an eternity, he handed the satchel back to Maverick. "Your story checks out, and your description of the contents is too specific to be coincidence. But I'm warning you, stranger, I'll be keeping an eye on you while you're in my county." "Understood, Sheriff. I'm planning to stay local, actually. Miss Brightwater here has offered me work on her grandmother's farm." All eyes turned to Cordelia, and she felt heat flood her cheeks. "That's right. Mr. Holloway will be helping with repairs and improvements." The sheriff's expression softened slightly as he looked at her. "Your grandmother was a fine woman, Cordelia, but be careful who you trust." His gaze shifted meaningfully. To Maverick, some folks aren't who they appear to be. As the crowd began to disperse and the auction resumed, Cordelia wondered if the sheriff's warning applied to more than just Maverick. After all, she'd just publicly committed to harboring a man she'd met minutes ago. A man whose very presence seemed to attract trouble like honey drew flies. The farmhouse looked even more forlorn in the late afternoon light. Its weathered clapboard, siding gray with age and neglect. Shingles hung loose from the roof like broken teeth, and the front porch sagged under the weight of too many harsh winters. But as Cordelia led Maverick up the overgrown path, she felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. "It's not much to look at right now," she said, fumbling with the rusted key. "But grandmother always said it had good bones." Avrik studied the structure with a professional eye, noting the solid stone foundation and the straight lines of the frame. She was right. This is quality construction, just needs some attention. The door opened with a groan of protest, revealing the cramped but clean interior. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight that streamed through windows clouded with age. The furniture was sparse, but sturdy, a kitchen table, scarred by decades of use, 2 mismatched chairs and an old trunk that served as both storage and seating. "There's a bedroom upstairs," Cordelia said, suddenly aware of how intimate it sounded. To be discussing sleeping arrangements with this man she barely knew. You can have it. I'll make do on the sofa down here. Absolutely not. Maverick set his satchel down beside the door. Take the barn. More privacy for both of us, and I can keep an eye on things. Cordelia wanted to argue, but something in his tone suggested the matter was closed. Instead, she busied herself lighting the oil lamps as evening shadows lengthened. Are you hungry? I could heat up some soup? That'd be fine. Move 2. Examine the window frame, testing the sash with careful hands. This whole window needs to be reset. The frame's warped and the glass is loose. As Cordelia worked at the stove, she found herself stealing glances at Maverick. His movements were economical and sure, the way a man moves when he's comfortable with tools and honest work. But there was something else, a watchfulness, as if he expected trouble to come calling at any moment. That wanted poster, she said suddenly, then immediately regretted her boldness. Maverick went still. What about it? The deputy had one in his pocket. I couldn't see the details, but she stirred the soup more vigorously than necessary. Are you in trouble, Maverick? Real trouble? He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. There are men looking for me, not lawmen, but men who don't make distinctions between guilt and innocence. What did you do? Witnessed? Something I shouldn't have. In a mining town outside Denver. Saw some powerful men doing things that would see them hanged if the right people knew about it. He turned from the window to face her. I tried to do the right thing. Took what evidence I could gather to the territorial marshal. Turns out he was in their pocket. Cordelia's hands stilled on the wooden spoon. So you ran. So I ran. Been running for 6 months now, staying ahead of the bounty hunters they hired. That money in my satchel? It's everything I own in the world, and it won't last much longer. Then why did you stop running? Why offer to help me? Maverick moved closer, and she caught the scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to his clothes. Because I'm tired, Cordelia, bone-deep tired of looking over my shoulder and sleeping with one eye open. And because you looked like you needed help as much as I needed to give it. The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. She ladled soup into 2 bowls, her hands surprisingly steady. What if they find you here? Then I'll face whatever comes. But I won't bring trouble to your door without warning you first. They ate in comfortable silence as full darkness settled over the farm. Outside, night sounds began their ancient chorusals, calling across the fields the rustle of small creatures in the grass, the distant yip of coyotes, normal sounds that somehow felt precious after the artificial noise and confusion of the auction. I'll start on the roof tomorrow, Maverick said. As they finished eating, she'd be able to patch the worst holes before the next rain. Cordelia nodded, then surprised herself by reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. Thank you for being honest with me. His fingers curled around hers for just a moment, warm and calloused and strong. Neither of them noticed the shadow that detached itself from the tree line and began a slow, careful approach toward the house. The first shot shattered the kitchen window, sending glass cascading across the floor like deadly snow. Cordelia screamed and dropped to her knees as Maverick overturned the table in one fluid motion, creating a barrier between them and the broken window. Stay down, he commanded, already moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd faced gunfire before. His revolver appeared in his hand as if by magic, its metal gleaming in the lamplight. Another shot splintered the doorframe. A voice called out from the darkness. We know you're in there, Holloway. Come out peaceful, and the woman doesn't get hurt. How many? Cordelia whispered, her heart hammering so hard she was sure the attackers could hear it. Can't tell yet. Maverick peered carefully around the edge of the overturned table. At least 2, maybe more. They've got us pinned down good. What do they want? Me. Dead or alive, though I suspect they prefer dead. His jaw tightened. Should have known they'd catch up eventually. Sorry, Cordelia. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. The words surprised them both. Cordelia crawled to the old trunk and threw it open, revealing her grandmother's double-barreled shotgun, along with a box of shells. Grandmother didn't survive the war by being helpless. Maverick stared at her with something approaching admiration. You know how to use that thing? Grandmother made sure I could protect myself. Cordelia's hands were steady as she loaded both barrels. These men want to hurt you. They'll have to go through me first. You're full of surprises, Miss Brightwater. Another voice joined the first, this one from a different direction. Time's up, Holloway. We're coming in. The front door exploded inward as someone put their shoulder to it. Maverick fired twice in quick succession, and they heard a cry of pain followed by heavy cursing. Bootsteps scrambled across the porch as the wounded man retreated. One down, Maverick muttered, reloading with practiced speed. But they'll try the back door next, as if summoned by his words, would splintered at the rear of the house. Cordelia swung the shotgun toward, the sound just as a dark figure burst through the kitchen doorway.
Out.
She pulled the trigger without hesitation, and the intruder went down hard, clutching his shoulder. Nice shooting, Maverick said grimly. But there'll be more. He was right. Through the broken windows, they could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, as at least 3 more attackers closed in. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. There's a root cellar, Cordelia said suddenly. Under the kitchen floor? Grandmother. Used it during Indian raids when she was young? It connects to a tunnel that comes up in the barn? Oh, can you get there without being seen? If we move now, while they're regrouping. She clutched the shotgun tighter. What about you? I'll keep them busy. Give you time to reach safety. No, the word came out harder than she intended. We go together or not at all. Maverick looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression surprise. Giving way to respect, then something deeper and more dangerous. All right, but when I say move, you move. There's no hesitation, no looking back. Understood. The root cellar trapdoor was hidden beneath a braided rug in the kitchen corner. As Maverick provided covering fire, Cordelia pried it open to reveal a ladder, descending into darkness. The tunnel beyond was narrow and cramped, barely wide enough for one person. Go, Maverick said, emptying his cylinder at shadowy figures approaching the house. I'll be right behind you. Cordelia dropped into the tunnel just as the remaining windows exploded in a hail of gunfire. Above her, she heard Maverick's boots. On the ladder rungs, then the scrape of the trapdoor being pulled shut, they crawled through absolute darkness, the tunnel walls rough against their shoulders. Behind them, angry voices shouted orders as the attackers discovered the house was empty. How far? Maverick whispered. 50 yards, maybe 60. Should come up behind the feed bins in the barn. When they finally emerged into the hay-scented darkness of the barn, both were breathing hard. Through gaps in the weathered boards, they could see the farmhouse silhouetted against flames. The attackers had set it ablaze. I'm sorry, Maverick said quietly, watching her childhood home burn. I'm so damn sorry. Cordelia wiped tears from her cheeks, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. It's just a building. What matters is that we're alive. But even as she said it, they could hear horses approaching through the night. The hunt was far from over. The horses circled the burning farmhouse like predators, the riders calling out to each other in harsh voices. From their hiding place in the barn loft, Cordelia and Maverick counted at least 6 men more than they'd initially faced. Professional bounty hunters, Maverick whispered, studying the methodical way they searched the grounds.
Ow.
Every building, every hiding place. We can't stay here. Where can we go? They've got us surrounded. Before Maverick could answer, the barn door creaked open. Footsteps moved cautiously across the hay-strewn floor below. A gruff voice called out, No, you're in here somewhere, Holloway. Might as well come out. We'll find you eventually. Cordelia's fingers tightened on her shotgun. Beside her, Maverick was absolutely still, barely breathing. In the dim light filtering through the barn slats, she could see the tension in every line of his body. The searcher moved methodically through the stalls, poking at hay bales with what sounded like a pitchfork. Each thrust brought him closer. To the ladder leading to the loft, suddenly, a commotion erupted outside. Horses whinnied, and men shouted, followed by the thunder of approaching hoofbeats. The searcher in the barn cursed and ran toward the door. Sheriff's coming, someone yelled. Mount up. We'll finish this another time. The bounty hunters scattered like leaves before a storm, their horses disappearing into the night, just as Sheriff Morrison and his deputies rode into the firelight. Cordelia sagged with relief, but Maverick remained tense. This isn't over. he said quietly. "They'll be back." They climbed down from the loft as Sheriff Morrison dismounted near the smoldering ruins of the farmhouse. His face was grim in the flickering light. "Cordelia, thank God you're safe." Shh. He strode toward them, his deputies spreading out to examine the scene. "We saw the fire from town. What happened here?" "Bounty hunters," Maverick said simply. "Come." For me, the sheriff's expression hardened. "I warned you about bringing trouble to this county." "He didn't bring it," Cordelia said firmly. "It followed him. There's a difference." Sheriff Morrison studied her soot-streaked face, and the shotgun still clutched in her hands. "You've been through hell tonight, both of you. But this can't continue. Those men will be back, and next time I might not arrive in time." "What do you suggest?" Maverick asked. "Leave. Tonight. Get as far from here as you can, and keep going." Cordelia felt something break inside her chest. "This is my home." "Your home is ashes now," the sheriff said gently. "And as long as he stays, you're in danger. Then I'll go with him." Stared at her in shock. Even Cordelia was surprised by her own words, but once spoken, she realized she meant them. "Completely, Cordelia. You can't," Maverick said. "Don't know what you're saying. Life on the run is no life at all. Life without you isn't much of a life either." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. "I know we've only known each other for hours, but something tells me those bounty hunters aren't the only ones chasing ghosts." Maverick's face went soft in the firelight. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you tried to do the right thing when it would have been easier to look away. But I know you're honest and gentle and brave. And I know that when those men started shooting, my first thought wasn't for my own safety, it was for yours." Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat. "This is all very touching, but you need to decide quickly. Those bounty hunters won't stay scared off for long." Maverick looked at the burning remains of Cordelia's past, then at her face, streaked with soot, but resolute in the firelight. "If we do this, there's no going back. There's no comfortable beds, no settled life. We'll be running until we can find a way. To clear my name, or until we can't run anymore," she finished. "I understand." "Then we ride north," he said quietly. "I have friends in Colorado who might help us. It's a long shot, but it's all we have." They prepared to leave everything behind. Neither noticed Deputy Billy lingering in the shadows. His face troubled as he watched them prepare for their desperate journey into the unknown. 3 weeks into their flight north, Cordelia discovered that love could bloom even in the shadow of danger. They traveled by night and sheltered by day, following cattle trails and creek beds that wouldn't appear on any map. Maverick proved to be a careful protector and surprisingly gentle companion, sharing his knowledge of wilderness survival while respecting the fear she tried so hard to hide. "There," he said, pointing to a thin column of smoke rising above the pine trees ahead. "Jeremiah's cabin. If he's still alive and still speaking to me, we might finally get some answers." He'd been climbing mountain trails for 2 days there, horses picking their way carefully through loose shale and fallen timber. Cordelia's back ached from sleeping on hard ground, and her hands were raw from gripping the reins. But she'd complained, not once. Her courage continued to amaze him. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, smoke curling peacefully from its stone chimney. It looked like a scene from a fairy tale, except for the rifle that appeared in the doorway as they approached. "That's far enough," called a voice weathered by age and tobacco. "State your business, Jeremiah." "It's Maverick Holloway. I need help." A pause, then the rifle lowered. "Well, I'll be damned. Thought you were dead by now, boy." Jeremiah Crowfeather emerged from the cabin, a grizzled mountain man who looked like he'd been carved from the very peaks around them. His weathered face broke into a grin as he recognized Maverick, but his eyes quickly moved to Cordelia with obvious curiosity. "And who might this lovely lady be?" "Cordelia Brightwater," Maverick said, dismounting and helping her down from her horse. "My ... companion." The old man's eyebrows rose. "Companion, is it? Well, any woman brave enough to ride with you through these mountains is welcome at my fire. Come in, both of you. Look like you could use a hot meal and some civilized conversation." The cabin's interior was rustic but comfortable. filled with the accumulated treasures of a lifetime spent in the wilderness. Animal pelts covered the walls, and shelves held books, specimens, and curiosities from across the frontier. A pot of something fragrant bubbled over the fire. "Jeremiah is a former territorial judge," Maverick explained as they settled around the rough-hewn table. "Retired up here after he got tired of corrupt politicians and bought justice." "Not retired," the old man corrected, ladling stew into wooden bowls. "Just relocated. Still got connections, still got ears in useful places. Speaking of which, I heard about your troubles in Denver. Nasty business, that. You know what happened? No more than you think. That silver mine conspiracy you stumbled into goes deeper than you imagined. Senator Blackthorn's involved, along with half the territorial legislature. They've been stealing claims, murdering honest miners, and covering it up with bought judges and sheriffs." Cordelia set down her spoon. "If you know all this, why hasn't someone stopped them?" Jeremiah's laugh held no humor, because proving it and surviving long enough to testify are two different things. Maverick here was the only witness who got away alive, which is why they want him dead so badly. "But there has to be something we can do," Cordelia insisted. "Some way to expose them." "Funny you should mention that." The old judge reached for a leather folder tucked behind a stack of books. "I've been gathering evidence myself. Affidavits from miners' widows, bank records showing suspicious transactions. Even a confession from one of Blackthorn's hired guns who got religion on his deathbed." Maverick leaned forward eagerly. "Is it enough?" "Might be, if we can get it. To the right people, federal marshals, not territorial. Men who can't be bought." Jeremiah's expression grew serious. "But it's dangerous. Real dangerous. These men have killed to protect their secret, and they won't hesitate to kill again." "What choice do we have?" Cordelia asked. "Keep running forever?" "She's got a point," Maverick said quietly. "I'm tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of bringing danger to good people. Then you'll need help." Jeremiah stood and moved to his gun cabinet. "Good thing I've got friends who don't much care for corrupt politicians either." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin windows like skeletal fingers. None of them noticed the figure crouched in the tree line watching through a spyglass. As they planned their desperate gambit for justice and freedom, the federal courthouse in Denver stood like a fortress of justice against the gray November sky. Inside, Cordelia gripped Maverick's hand as they waited in the witness chamber, surrounded by U.S. Marshals who'd escorted them safely through streets crawling with Blackthorn's hired guns. "You don't have to do this," Maverick said quietly. "Jeremiah's evidence might be enough without your testimony. We've been through this." Cordelia straightened the simple blue dress she'd borrowed for the occasion, her first proper dress in months of frontier living. "I was there that night at the farm. I saw what those men were willing to do to silence you. The jury needs to hear that." Through the window, they could see crowds gathering outside, drawn by news of the sensational trial that promised to expose corruption reaching into the highest levels of territorial government. Senator Blackthorn himself sat in the defendant's dock, his face a mask of cold fury as witness after witness testified to his crimes. "Mr. Holloway," a marshal appeared in the doorway. "You're up next." Maverick squeezed Cordelia's hand once more, then walked into the packed courtroom with quiet dignity. From her seat in the witness chamber, she could see him clearly as he approached the stand, tall and proud despite months of hardship. His testimony was devastating. In clear, measured tones, he described witnessing the murder of 3 honest miners who'd refused to sell their claims. He detailed the conspiracy to falsify territorial records and bribe officials. Most damning of all, he produced the original documents. He'd risked everything to steal documents that proved Blackthorn's guilt beyond doubt. "And what happened when you tried to bring this evidence to territorial authorities?" the prosecutor asked. "They tried to kill me," Maverick replied simply. "Multiple times. Hired professional bounty hunters to track me down. Burned out an innocent woman's home because she'd offered me shelter." When it was Cordelia's turn, she walked to the witness stand with her head high, ignoring the hostile stares from Blackthorn's supporters in the gallery. Her voice never wavered as she described the night attack on her farm. the terror of being hunted by armed men, and her decision to flee with Maverick rather than abandon him to his fate. "Miss Brightwater," the defense attorney said during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you've developed romantic feelings for the defendant? That your testimony might be influenced by these emotions?" "Yes, I love him," Cordelia replied, without hesitation, "but love doesn't change facts. Those men tried to murder us both that night. I saw it with my own eyes." The trial lasted 3 days. When the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Senator Blackthorne and his co-conspirators were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, their criminal enterprise finally brought to justice outside the courthouse. Maverick and Cordelia stood together in the crisp autumn air, finally free from the shadow that had pursued them across half the continent. "So what now?" Cordelia asked. "Where do we go from here?" "Jeremiah offered us his cabin for the winter," Maverick said, pulling her close. "Give us time to decide what we want to do with the rest of our lives." "I know what I want to do." She turned in his arms, looking up into the amber eyes that had captivated her from their first meeting. "I want to marry you, Maverick Holloway. I want to build a life with you, whether it's in a mountain cabin or a city house or a covered wagon heading west." His answer was a kiss that tasted of freedom and promise and love that had been tested by fire. Around them, people passed by on their daily business, but for Cordelia and Maverick, the world had narrowed to just this moment. It's just this perfect beginning. 6 months later, they were married in Jeremiah's clearing, surrounded by wildflowers and mountain peaks and a small gathering of friends who'd help them find their way home to each other. And if sometimes at night they woke from dreams of burning houses and pursuing horsemen, they had only to reach for each other to remember that some kinds of treasure are worth any price to protect. The drifter had found his place at last, and the woman who discovered his hat had discovered something infinitely more. Precious a love strong enough to weather any storm that life might bring.